All right, well, welcome back to another episode of the Social Change Makers podcast. I'm Rebecca Chambers, and I will be bringing us in, but handing the virtual microphone over to our veteran podcaster. Zenya has taken a real liking to the podcasting, so we're really excited to have Zenya hosting another podcast. Zenya, can you tell everyone what issue you've been looking at over the last 10 weeks and what have you learned so far?
Yeah, so over the past 10 weeks, I've been looking into the housing crisis, as what I call it. And it's basically like I think we have too big of houses and we need more space for housing. And the houses that we build currently aren't exactly environmentally friendly. And that I've been looking into alternative housing like tiny houses and van life, et cetera, about how they can be better for the environment and how they can help have more space in the city so we don't have to keep on expanding the cities. And yeah, that's kind of all what I'm learning about in a nutshell.
Yeah, and it's been so exciting because I've learned a ton. You know, we've done a couple interviews and just even watching you go through the course and connecting Canadian geography to it. It's been unbelievable. I think we talked last night briefly. I live outside of Ottawa in a small town and we live on a 2-acre property. And I'm considering approaching my husband and seeing what it would take to put a tiny house on our property. I think it'd be really cool. But we are very excited to introduce and welcome our guests this week. Danielle and Mat are here from Exploring Our Alternatives YouTube channel. You can tell I'm old, right? Because there's probably a way to say that properly.
That was pretty good. That was good.
Yeah. I watch my kids watch YouTube all the time and I'm like, you have a TV right there. What's happening? So each week, Danielle and Mat post a new video about people who are living in tiny houses, vans, RVs, and boats, and people who are exploring long-term travel, minimalism, zero waste living, off-grid living, and more. They also sometimes share videos about their own lifestyle experiments. So welcome, Danielle and Mat.
Thank you. We're excited to be here.
For having us.
Yeah. So I'm going to hand it over to Zenya, and she's going to get into the interview.
Yeah, thanks, Rebecca. Thank you so much, Danielle and Mat, for coming. Can you tell us a little bit about your YouTube channel and how it got started and what's it all about so everybody can get an idea of what you guys do?
Yeah, well, Rebecca introduced it pretty well. So we started our YouTube channel 6 years ago. It's hard to believe we've been making videos that long. And it started off just as sort of a platform where we could share videos about our experience traveling in a van. So we had this really simple camper van that we had built. And we were really interested in trying different lifestyles, similar to what you said, Zenya. We were really interested in, finding better ways to live where we could reduce our environmental footprint, maybe live in a smaller space and consume less stuff, and live more affordably as well. So we used to have a 4-bedroom house. We sold it, we traveled for a while, then we started the van life, and we were just really trying to be open-minded and just see what was out there. And we started meeting people who were doing all these different things, and we decided we wanted to share what they were doing too. So that's how we started filming people. We just, email like, hey, can we come over and see inside your house? And at first it seemed really odd, but now we've kind of gotten used to it, and people are so generous with just letting us into their homes and sharing their experience. So we've gotten to see people living in all kinds of different houses, and it's been really neat and really inspiring to see what they're doing.
That's amazing.
But yeah, but most of it started because we bought a house and we were in it only for a year and a half, but we found that we were kind of maxed out financially. It was just too much every month for us to handle. So we got out of that, and that's kind of what started everything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's amazing. Did you find it like a big change, or like it was a hard change to downsize so much from like a 4-bedroom to like tiny living?
It was a lot of work. Yeah, it's an emotional process because you're going through every single thing, like, oh, I remember someone gave me this plate or this cup or whatever it is, this plant, you know, and we tried to find good homes for all of our stuff. We sold a lot of things on Kijiji. We donated things. We gave things to friends and family. And we just really kept a few bins of really sentimental stuff. Matt's an artist, so he kept a lot of his art and his sculpture molds and things. And I kept, you know, journals and a couple photo albums. Over the years, that pile has grown. We've left it at our parents' house. So every year we just drop off a little something to add to it, you know?
But yeah, that was a really hard process because we had a house, like a regular size house, and we filled it up in just a year and a half. We managed to fill that thing up pretty good. Mm-hmm. So getting rid of most of the stuff was quite the challenge. It was really intense.
Yeah.
And like when you're not looking at the stuff, you could get rid of it much easier. But it's when you start looking at each individual item mm-hmm. that, like Danielle said, you feel like some kind of attachment to it, and it's so much harder to get rid of it.
Mm-hmm. And it is easy to go too far too. Like I do have a few little things that I wish I hadn't given away now that I'm older. It's been 8 years since we did that. And so, you know, it's interesting how things change. But minimalism, I think that's one of your future questions, but is different for everybody. And it's all about finding the right balance for you. So, you know, we got rid of all of our books, for example, but for some other people, that might be their prized possession and it really enriches their life. And so for someone like that, you can still be a minimalist and keep your books if that's the most important thing to you, you know? So it's all about, tailoring your lifestyle to what's important to you, and then just getting rid of any excess that's not helping you. You know, like we had a basement full of stuff. We had this problem of going to garage sales and secondhand stores and like, oh, that's cute. And we just end up with this pile of stuff you don't need. And then that actually causes stress. And so getting rid of it is actually helpful, whereas getting rid of something you care about is not helpful. So it's important to know yourself and to just go slowly and
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I know what you mean when you feel like all of a sudden really attached to something that you're about to throw away. I've been doing like a challenge, like try and throw away like 10 things a week that's in my room. And it's like, it's really tricky. You don't think it's that tricky, but it's like, you feel like you're all of a sudden attached to everything. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So can you tell us like a little bit about like how to downsize and like any tips and tricks on downsizing into a tiny house?
So I guess I would start by, there's a whole lot of different ways that people suggest doing it. And so again, it really depends how you want to do it. We've seen some challenges where it's like you tackle one space per day or per week, you know, so you do your kitchen first and then you do your bedroom or whatever. We kind of just did it in a really messy way where we just made a huge mess in the house and like everything was on the ground and it was just like, oh my God. And there was just piles of everything. So I guess, one that I really like that I find really interesting is you take everything that you think you can live with, you keep that and you box up everything else and you still keep everything in the house. So you haven't gotten rid of it, but you've segregated it. And then throughout the month or two following that, you may find like, oh, I actually do need that second frying pan, or I do need, you know, that cookbook. And so you go and pull those out. And then, so that allows you sort of, it's like a little practice run. So you haven't actually given it away yet. And then once a couple of months have gone by and you've pulled everything out that sort of came up, then you have a better idea of like what you actually are ready to give away.
I find something really interesting that happened. It's kind of not quite answering your question there, but I wanted to mention it because when we sold our house, we put a lot of our things that we did want to keep into boxes, and we stored a few of those boxes at my dad's house. And it was really interesting to see that, like, we left for a year and pretty much I couldn't remember almost anything that was in those boxes, and I didn't care about them. After a year being gone, they could have disappeared completely, and all the stuff in it I wouldn't really care about. And then going back a year later and opening the boxes, I started getting attached to the things again. So maybe something that people could do would be to just put things away and see if they actually remember what is in those boxes.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I've noticed that before too. Like in the basement, we have like some like things in boxes that we keep away that are like special, and we just like make sure we have them. But then sometimes I look at them and I'm like, I didn't even know I had this anymore. Like, wow.
Yeah.
And then you suddenly want to keep them again. And it's kind of funny because it's like it seems like downsizing is such an easy thing to do, but it's like it's really difficult. Yeah.
For sure. Yeah, I guess one other tip would be you don't necessarily have to get rid of everything. Like, let's say you have, I don't know, a teddy bear collection, for example. You don't need to get rid of all the teddy bears. You could keep like your top 5 that are really important to you, you know? So it's not necessarily about just throwing everything out, but just really selecting the things that are meaningful to you. And it's okay to be attached to certain things and just recognizing what those are versus what are some false attachments. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's amazing. So I'm going to kind of switch notes here. So what are some of the coolest things that you guys experienced when traveling and learning about downsizing and tiny houses and alternative living?
It's definitely the people. Everybody that we meet is so inspiring, and they're all doing it for different reasons. You know, you would think, I mean, there's some common threads, but everyone has sort of different things that are important to them, whether it's protecting nature or using less water or being independent and producing renewable energy, or, you know, just living in a small space. So that's been really cool. Every single person we've met has been fun. And we usually get to spend a whole day with them when we're filming a video. So, and being in someone's home and you see what they eat and you see where they sleep, and it's very personal. It's like you become friends just in one day. So that's been really fun. Yeah. I think one of the coolest videos we did that I think it's meaningful for both of us was in Iceland. We went and filmed a turf house, and it was actually a museum, but the owner, his whole family had lived there. It was basically a restored home where like his grandmother had been born and given birth to all their kids, and his mom was born there, and he let us go and spend a few hours in there on our own, and it was so special. You know, it was a space where normally it would just be, you know, you quickly walk through it. And then he showed us around and talked about the whole history of the house and how it was built, and it was so cool.
Yeah, it was pretty incredible.
Yeah, like the houses there, it's built so specifically to Iceland. You know, they use these specific rocks that you get there. They're volcanic rocks that have air in them, so they're really lightweight and easy to build with. And then they use the turf from the fields nearby that's like really dense. It's not like grass here. All the roots are really dense, so you can actually slice it and use it almost like a brick.
Wow.
And they design it so that you can reuse the house over and over. So they actually, every 50 years or so, they would take the house down and replace the turf, but use all the same stones. So the stones are from, like, it may have been the same stones in, you know, half a dozen houses. So that was really interesting to see. And talking about green building, I mean, I don't know how much more sustainable you can get if you're just literally building with grass and rocks.
Grass and rocks.
Yeah.
But yeah, it has been really, really interesting and inspiring to see, especially the builders who just spend so much time and energy and create these amazing buildings and living spaces. That's been really, really inspiring.
That's amazing. Yeah, it's amazing how, like, you know, there's so many different ways to build a house. Like, you don't notice until like you're like, wow, that person used volcanic rocks to build their house. Like, whoa. And you can rebuild it every 50 years. That's amazing. Like, yeah. Can you guys tell us a little more about like specific types of alternative housing you've like seen, like van life, sailboat life, living in a camper van? I know you guys, I think you've interviewed people who lived in school buses as well. Like, that's really amazing. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, we've seen everything from people living in school buses, earth ships, tiny houses, container homes, yurts,
tiny houses. Yeah. Oh, you said tiny house.
Yeah, I said tiny house already.
I guess we do a lot of tiny houses.
I don't know. I'm probably forgetting some.
What's funny, I think about it, is that for each sort of category of housing, there seems to be some similarities in the people who choose that type of housing. And so, for example, people who are living in yurts, we've filmed a few people who live full time in them. They're really connected to the earth. And so they've chosen this really simple, minimalist structure. You know, it's just wood and a layer of felt insulation and a piece of canvas on top. So it's like a pretty extreme lifestyle, but they're really, really serious about reducing their impact on the earth. And so it's like a temporary structure. It doesn't have a foundation. And they just are so deeply connected to nature. And so that was interesting to see. And then school buses, we've noticed in our experience, it seems to be young, like groups of friends or young couples and families who just kind of want to do a trip for a year or two. So that the school buses, people live in them, in our experience, it seems to be more of like trip based, you know?
Yeah.
Tiny houses, it seems like it's a lot of people who maybe can't afford their first house. And so they've decided, you know, this is a more affordable way for me to own my own home. Yeah, so it's kind of funny, like when we find someone new that we're going to film, it's interesting to see, you know, is this person going to sort of match up with this? I guess it's a bit of a stereotype that we've created, but it's really interesting too, to see how certain people are drawn to certain types of housing.
Yeah.
People living in earthships, they're really passionate about, you know, being able to reuse building materials, like, well, they're not even really building materials, but they use recycled tires and bottles and stuff like that. So they're passionate about.
And using, just not using energy to heat the house and cool the house.
Yeah, that's amazing. How would you guys recommend starting like a tiny house lifestyle or living in an earth shelter or school bus? Like how do you recommend them? Like, do you think they should research first and then downsize and then like maybe like slowly move into smaller and smaller houses, or what do you think about that?
I would say the best thing, because there's a lot of options for rent right now, like on Airbnb or like glamping hub. I would say, you know, if it's possible for you in your area, go rent a tiny house for maybe even just a couple days or
an earthship
or an earthship or whatever it is that you're interested in, and get like a real experience for perhaps living in a space that size. And maybe, you know, it might cost a little bit of money to rent it for a couple of nights, but maybe it'll save you a lot of money if you realize that it's not for you, you know? So it's a great way to try it out.
Yeah, for sure. I think, I mean, with Instagram and with social media in general, it can be easy to sort of, you know, watch videos and look at photos of a certain type of house and think, oh, that looks perfect. I think that would be great for me. But until you actually try it, you won't actually know if that's the right thing for you, right? So yeah, definitely for any kind of lifestyle or anything, we always suggest that people try it.
Yeah.
For van life, we've had a lot of people, you know, like, how do I get started? And it's like, do you have a car? Just try sleeping in it in a parking lot for one night and just see. Like, it's a weird feeling, you know, to just be driving around and traveling in your car and sleeping in it. So try that before you buy a van and convert the entire thing, before you realize like, oh, maybe this is like too extreme or a little bit too odd. And I think we got some really good advice from a structural engineer who's caretaking an earthship last year. He was saying that often he finds there's sort of like a disconnect, or people haven't quite organized their thoughts around like what their priorities are and the house that they want. And so they might get things a little bit confused. So it can help to write things down. Like, are you looking for something that's going to be energy efficient, or do you want the natural building materials? Because those aren't necessarily the same thing. You know, you could put solar panels on any house, but, you know, maybe you want the earthship or a cob house because it's built with clay, sand, and straw. So he thinks it's really important to outline what's important to you. And then that will help determine what kind of house would be a good fit before, rather than just like, you know, choosing a house. Because it looks good, or you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, you definitely have to, like, I feel like you really do need to think about like what's like for you, like if you want a cob house or whatever. And it ends up in like having a house that reflects like the person's personality. And that's what I think is really amazing about a tiny house. Like, what do you guys think about like how tiny houses are? Like, if somebody really likes nature, like maybe their tiny house is like really like shaped and meant to be in like an environment that's around, I don't know, a forest or
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think one of the neat things about tiny houses is if you like some of them that we've been in, they have windows on all sides and they even have skylights and stuff. And so it's kind of neat to be in a space where you're surrounded and you can actually really sort of feel like you're living indoors and outdoors at the same time. you know, like where we're staying right now, there's only windows on one wall. So we have this one view, but it's really interesting being in a small space when you have almost like a 360-degree view of nature wherever it is that you're parked. So that's really neat too. Yeah. And then another thing that's neat is, you know, with a tiny house, it has such a small footprint. So often where people have it parked, they actually have space to be able to have a garden or to plant trees or, you know, have their pets run around. So that's another benefit too, is you have a little bit more green space around you, depending on where you parked it. But yeah.
Yeah. Coming back to like the question that we started talking about this on, like how to start like going tiny, how do you recommend starting? How do you recommend starting like a family to like live in a tiny space? Because I know like that's a lot of people, and like, have you ever seen people, or have you ever talked to people who like said maybe they argued a lot with their family because they're in like a small space and they're constantly seeing each other, or like if they have like a dog or something, how do they incorporate that with the space?
I guess I would say it's when you're thinking of having a family in a tiny house, it is, I think, a lot more challenging, and it's not for every family. We have met like several families who did live in tiny houses for maybe until the kids got to their teenage years, and then moved out of the tiny house. Maybe they bought a regular house or rented a regular house and then kept the tiny house to rent it on Airbnb or something like that. We've seen quite a few of those. So it does seem to be a little more challenging with a family, or if you have someone that, you know, like two big dogs or something like that.
Yeah, I think of the families that we've met who lived young children, what they did that was really interesting was they made sure that the kids had their own bedroom. They could go and, you know, close the door. I think that's helpful when they're babies, or you can, you know, put them down for a nap and then they have their own space to be quiet. But also I think it's important for kids to have a little bit of privacy, or like a little nook where they can go and play or whatever. So that was interesting. Yeah, the two tiny houses both had a little bedroom for the kids on the main floor, and then the parents had the loft that was more open concept. But it does seem like once the kids start to get a little bit older, it does become challenging for some families, and then they tend to move out.
We did meet a woman though, close to Montreal, who lived in there with her teenage daughter.
Yep. And again, she had the bedroom.
Yeah.
Yeah, they had a separate bedroom for the daughter. Like the daughter was in the loft in that one, and she just had a little door that she could close for privacy. I mean, but yeah, I think when you make that decision, I guess, to have a family in a tiny house, I guess, again, we usually make lists of everything. So, you know, in the pros and cons, like, yes, you're going to lose a little bit of privacy, but you're going to gain more time together. You're going to maybe have to work less because your expenses aren't so high. So you get some nice quality time together. And then also some people bring up this thing of like, why do we all need so much privacy? Maybe we should be closer together, and it forces us to confront issues like, why are we not getting along, or why are we arguing? You know, like Matt and I, when we're sitting in the van, you know, 24/7, traveling, filming, editing, you know, you can't, if you're in an argument, you can't get away from each other. We're literally sitting this far apart from each other, you know, and so you can like turn your head.
Yeah, there's not much you can do to get some space.
Yeah, you can't go and like go in another room. So then eventually you're like, this is ridiculous. We're going to talk about it.
You have to resolve issues very quickly.
Yeah.
Because you're so close.
And so it's interesting. Some people really like that dynamic in their family because it forces them to be more honest and communicate more. So yes, so I guess there's pros and cons. And again, people who are open to having a family in a tiny house probably have thought about those things in advance. It's definitely not for everybody.
And again, in this case too, if you have a family and you're thinking about doing something like that, you could just go rent a tiny house for a weekend.
Mm-hmm.
Go in there with your kids and see if you like it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. I know what you mean by that, like to go try living in a tiny house together. I've stayed in one with my family in New York State. I forget what the place was called, but it was a really small tiny house, and we stayed in there for 2 nights, and we were like, okay, this is way too tiny. Like we can barely move around without like hitting each other. So now we know that like if we ever want to like move into a tiny house or like stay in another tiny house, we know we want it to be a bit bigger, for example. So yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, definitely. When you were talking about having kids in a tiny house, it reminded me of like there was one tiny house I saw. I'm not sure if it was from you guys or not, but they had like a net that went over 2 lofts, and it was like a place where kids could play and stuff. Like, have you guys seen any other really cool things that like people have included for their kids?
That's a good question. Not in a tiny house, but we did tour this the zoo. It's called the Zoo Box, and it had like a fireman's pole in it, and it had a climbing wall where they had like, all the handholds in the wall, and just like really unique ladder that was built into the wall. And so like different things, the bed was actually suspended from the ceiling, and so you had to like pull it down. So it was a really interactive house, which was pretty neat. And we've seen not ourselves, but in other people's videos too, like a lot of people do climbing walls, and we've seen the nets and stuff like that. So yeah, it does seem like you can be a little bit more playful when you're designing a tiny house than a regular house. Yeah, make it a little more fun. Yeah,
definitely. Also, have you guys, on that note, like, have you guys seen any like cool foldable furniture? Like, I know there's like, you can have dining room tables that fold down from the wall and then like extend really far out, or like I don't know if you guys interviewed anybody, but I think they're called Lego apartments. They literally have everything folding out from the walls, like their kitchen, their bedroom. Could you like expand on that?
We've seen a lot of those like in videos online and stuff like that, and we've seen a few pieces of folding furniture in the videos that we filmed. But we'd like to explore more of that. It is pretty fascinating.
Yeah, I think one of the coolest ones, like we've seen a couple of like really neat tables that sort of swivel and fold out, like you said, and then they can suddenly fit like 8 people, but it's actually just this little dining cart when it's not being used, and you can tuck it away. We've seen Murphy beds and things like that that just fold down from the wall. One that I really love that I've seen online is this ladder that sort of folds up flat against the wall, and then each, do you know what I mean? It kind of like, it's like this, and then it kind of comes down.
Yeah.
And so it takes up almost no space, and it's really easy to put up and down. I'm actually surprised there aren't more people with ladders like that. It's looks easier to pull it down than to pick up an entire ladder. Because the one thing you don't know, I mean, just maybe watching the videos, is those ladders are usually pretty heavy. And it's pretty awkward if that's the kind of thing you have to move every time you want to go up to your bedroom or whatever. So I think that's why in a lot of videos you'll hear us say, we really like stairs, because the ladder, I mean, it's okay for a weekend or a couple weeks, but they can get a little annoying to move around.
Yeah, we're definitely fans of stairs in tiny houses.
Sorry, you can go ahead.
No, I was just finishing, like, we have seen some folding furniture in the videos that we filmed, but we hope to see more in the future.
I would say, like, for the Lego apartments, and even just in our van, where there are a few, like, our bed transforms into our couch and into our kind of work area, and then the kitchen has like a fold-up table. Living in a space like that, it's really neat to have those transforming pieces, but at a certain point I do feel like you can get too small, and it's almost like, if you make the small space too efficient, it actually becomes inefficient, in the sense that, like, let's say you've got the setup with the kitchen out, and then you want to like put that away to sit down on the couch, and you need to move things or whatever, like that can get really impractical. And so it's definitely like for a certain type of person. For example, we realized we could probably live in something like that if we were going to work every day and you just come home and you're only there for a few hours. But if you were working from home and cooking and all the different things, it might not be as practical. So that's the other thing, is some of the lifestyles and some of the houses we feature, they're actually quite extreme in how small they are, or in the way that they're operated. But we still like to feature those, not because they're good options and that we think everybody should live in, but sometimes it feels like by sort of showing one extreme, it makes like small steps towards being more environmentally friendly in the way houses are designed more accessible, if you know what I mean. Like showing a tiny like 10 by 10 house that's 100% run on solar seems really extreme, but then maybe it makes someone in a you know, in a 2,000 square foot house think, oh, maybe I could put solar panels on and that wouldn't be such a big deal.
Yeah.
So in some ways, some of these spaces, they're not practical for everyone to live in, but they're really good for raising awareness about, you know, it is possible to live in less space. It doesn't mean everyone goes that small, but maybe they just need 3-bedroom house instead of 4, whatever it is.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Yeah, because it's amazing because anybody can really like put solar panels on their house. So it's good to just have like, you know, the inspiration there. Yeah, definitely. Coming back to when we were talking about how like stairs versus a ladder in a tiny house, just kind of a funny question, like in most of the tiny houses that I see, there's always a ladder and not stairs. And I'm wondering, is it like hard to install stairs in a tiny house, or is it impractical, or yeah?
It's definitely an extra, it's going to take some extra space in a tiny house. A ladder is easier to tuck away, and it's more, you have more options, I think, because you can have it like accessible and then put it away. But we've been seeing more and more tiny houses built with staircases, so it is possible. There's we've seen quite a few designs that were in tiny houses that were pretty much the same size as ones with ladders, and it works. It all depends on the design, I think.
Yeah,
I think you end up having a longer tiny house if you have stairs.
Yeah,
sometimes.
maybe sometimes.
But some of the newer ones that we've seen, they're designing it sort of like as a bit of a spiral, so it doesn't take, you know, you don't have it running the entire length of your house. It kind of turns back on itself in like a 90-degree turn.
Yeah.
Anyway, so people are being pretty innovative. It's really neat to see the builders every year coming up with new ways to make the space more efficient.
And they're usually, and the ones we've seen, they're almost always using that staircase space, the space under the stairs, as storage. Maybe the fridge is at the very end of it, like built into the stairs. So there's a way to use that space still.
Yeah, definitely. Also, like I was just thinking, like when people have a ladder in their tiny house, I'm always thinking, what if they're older and they're in a tiny house with a ladder and they can't get up into their loft? Like, exactly. You have to plan ahead a lot as well. Also, what you were talking about, how like people include storage under their stairs, like that's really smart. Like, have you guys seen any other really smart like storage features in tiny houses?
Yeah, I mean, one of the ones that we've noticed that's super interesting is those, I think they're made by IKEA actually, and they're just these beds that you can actually pull this little strap and the whole mattress portion pops up, and then the entire space under your bed is accessible. So it's almost like having a garage or a basement, you know, where you can tuck away your winter clothes or sports gear and things like that.
Yeah, it's a huge amount of space, and it's easy to lift. It's on hydraulics, so like you lift it with one hand. And
a lot of other people seem to have 2 lofts, so they might have like a sleeping loft on one end, and then they'll have a smaller loft on the other side that could be sort of like a guest bed. But often they just end up, you know, keeping bins up there of a few things that, you know, that we all have living in Canada, like big winter coats and stuff like that you don't necessarily want out year round. Yeah,
definitely. That's amazing. I've also seen like storage under the floorboards and like storage that pulls down from the ceiling. Those are also really smart. And it's amazing how much different storage compartments there can be in a tiny house, because it's kind of unbelievable, because it's like you can still have a lot of stuff when living tiny.
Oh yeah, like even in our camper van right now, if we took out everything that's in there and just laid it down on the ground, it's insane how much stuff we have in there. And the space is so small, but we built it with a ton of like storage, and we really filled it up.
Yeah, and I think that's another recommendation that we usually make to people, and that we try to do in our van too, is if you are going to transition to living in a tiny house and you have the opportunity to design your own, thinking about what you actually own and what you're going to bring into the house. So maybe not just thinking, you know, like, oh, I'll just design it and hope everything fits. You really think like, how many toiletries do I usually have, and how much space does that fit, and can I fit it, you know, behind this mirror? And then, you know, things like that. How many pairs of shoes do I have? How big is my shoe rack going to need to be? And stuff like that. So you actually build it according to what you're going to have in there.
Yeah, like even in the van, for example, we built little bookshelves, and I thought it was kind of annoying because I wanted to build faster, but Danielle would measure everything.
Well, I'd bring out a stack of books and go, okay, this is the average book size. So this is how deep it should be. And, you know, in the bathroom, we had a medicine cabinet that we were building, and Matt just thought, oh, we'll just put 3 shelves. And I was like, well, why don't we measure? One could be for like deodorant sized things, and then the next one could be...
she would go get the soap that we usually buy and measure it, put it in. But in the end, it actually is much more practical.
I win.
You win this one.
Yeah. Also, like for like, since coronavirus is happening, and like I feel like a lot of people are trying to buy like a lot of toilet paper and like a lot of paper towels or soap. How do you guys manage? Like, do you guys buy a bunch of that stuff? And like for coronavirus, and like, where do you put it? Like, do you run out of space? Do you end up having like toilet paper like in the middle of the floor?
Well, yeah, we were really lucky. Well, not lucky, unlucky, I guess. But a lot of people who were living in vans, specifically because it's such a small space, we noticed a lot of them found land or places to park where they could be a little bit more settled during the pandemic, because it sort of opened our eyes. We used to have, as van dwellers, I think a lot of us had this idea, you know, we're so free and we're independent to go wherever we want, but actually we're very dependent on everything being open and functioning normally, like the campgrounds. You need to be able to go and have a shower, or the gym, or, you know, being able to go to the library to get Wi-Fi. So when all of that sort of shut down, everybody sort of scurried to go find a spot where they could park. And so we actually were visiting family, and we ended up just staying with them for a few months. So we stocked up on toilet paper at my parents' house. But even in the van now, in the last couple of months when we were in it, we did have toilet paper crammed everywhere. And like paper towels. And it is, yeah, you do decide like, what am I going to prioritize? But the main thing that we tend to stockpile is trying to get fresh water in the van. Because that seems to be the trickiest thing to find. So we just have like jugs of water everywhere.
Yeah, it's full of water.
Yeah. How do you guys interview people like during this pandemic? Like, do you guys social distance for 14 days, or do you wear masks when you're interviewing people?
That's been pretty awkward, because usually it's kind of a fun experience meeting people and spending the day with them and just having lunch and hanging out. But now we wear masks, like whenever we're indoors with them, we wear masks. They don't have a mask. Well, like if we're interviewing them, they don't have a mask, but they're being interviewed by 2 like weirdos with masks. So it's really hard to like, I don't know, to read our facial expressions and stuff. It just makes the interview like a lot more challenging. And then we also, like ahead of time, we send them like if you send them some questions just to
just make sure that they haven't been exposed to it. We tend to spend as much time as possible outside with them if we can, and then Matt disinfects the microphone between each person and everything like that. When it first happened, we generally tend to be in the van just half the year, and that's when we sort of plan to film all of our videos, because it's just too cold in the winter to be in the van and to be filming. And so in March, that was when we should have been getting ready to hit the road and film. So we had almost no videos left, actually. And so we had to hustle, and we were really lucky that we were able to collaborate with some people long distance, where other YouTubers would film their interview and send us the footage, and we would edit it and put it together. And so that way they got some promotion, and then we were also able to keep the channel going. Then we did a little tour in Ontario, down in Hamilton and everything, filmed some videos, social distancing. And then when we flew to BC, it wasn't required, but we did spend 2 weeks at a campground, just Matt and I, self-isolating, because we didn't want to bring it from one province to the next. Mm-hmm. And being on an airplane, like there's no guarantee, even though everyone had masks on. So we had all our groceries delivered to the campground and everything. And so we did that before filming around here. And then here we've been doing the same thing, which is just, you know, we're not socializing indoors with anybody, which I think a lot of people in BC are finding frustrating, because they've had a really different experience of the coronavirus compared to Ontario. It's not been as bad. Their shutdown wasn't as extreme. There's still a lot of places here where you can go shopping without masks and stuff. And it's been really odd to see after experiencing how it was in Ontario and Quebec. So a lot of people, when we show up and we're like, we're going to wear a mask and we're disinfecting everything, they're like, seems a little extreme, but we're trying to be as cautious as possible, because I think that's what everyone should be doing.
And we're trying to be cautious for them and for the next person that we're going to go film.
But yeah, it's crazy how much COVID has affected everybody's work, not just ours, but luckily we've been able to, adapt, and working online, that's been really helpful for us and for a lot of people to be able to stay home and, limit your contact.
Yeah, definitely. And also, like, that's great about being a YouTuber, because you can do a lot of things like at home and like, editing your videos and stuff. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Have you guys been like traveling in your camper van, like during when coronavirus kind of started in the summer? Like, were you guys actually like out of Ottawa, like, or out of Canada during when coronavirus started? And was it like tricky to come back into Canada?
We were in BC last year also, and then we flew back to Ottawa to go visit family on like March 10th or something, and a couple days later coronavirus happened. So we actually didn't have our van with us. We were supposed to just go home, do doctor and dentist visits and say hi to everyone and then come back here for the summer. And so we ended up, it was like a tricky situation, but we ended up going to my parents' house in Northern Ontario and spending a few months there just waiting, because nobody really knew, how long is this going to last? And it didn't feel safe to fly back to BC to get our van. So we waited and waited and waited. And then finally it was just getting to be a lot, to not have all of our gear. Some of our gear was still in the van. A lot of our clothes were here. Like, we didn't have any shorts with us, and you couldn't go shopping. So we wore like long pants all summer. And, so it was getting pretty awkward, and we were just missing our van. And we also needed to film some videos. So we finally decided at the end of August to come out here. Yeah. So no, we didn't really get stuck. I think the weirdest thing that happened is, at first we were staying at Matt's parents' house in Quebec, and they actually closed the border between the provinces for a few days. And they were checking ID to make sure that no one from Ontario was coming into Quebec unless you could prove that you worked there. And we realized, like, we're from Ontario, they weren't going to let us in anymore. And that's why we had to move to my parents. So that was a pretty weird experience to see a border set up within your own country.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Yeah, it's a big change to like shift from one thing and then all of a sudden go into like coronavirus mode. Like, you need to shut down and everything. Did you guys have any trouble like planning to like start up doing your videos again after coronavirus started? Like, were you guys thinking that, like, I don't know, your YouTube channel would slow down or anything?
Yeah, we definitely thought that might happen.
It didn't slow down at all. Actually, people, I guess, had more time to spend on the internet and on YouTube, so it kind of just stayed the same. So we were worried about it, but it was actually okay.
Yeah, but we did make sure to set some money aside as soon as it happened. We didn't know what would happen with YouTube, and that's one of the weird things about working, like having YouTube as a job, is you can't predict from one day to the next who's going to see your videos, how many people are going to watch it. So we always try to have like what we call an emergency fund, where it's like, okay, what if this whole thing stops next month? We can't project that, like, we can't really rely on it. And so we always try to have some money saved up for a few months, just to get us through any kinds of valleys that might happen. So we sort of were aware of that and cut back on our spending as soon as that happened, just in anticipation. But it is funny that our views ended up going straight up, because mostly with off-grid things, I think everybody wanted to like flee the cities, and so people were actually really looking for ways of like how to grow food and how to live off-grid and be self-sufficient. So it was interesting to see that spike.
But even without COVID, we kind of always have that mentality that it could end at any time, what we're doing, just because YouTube is kind of like our main platform, and it's unpredictable. You never know what they're going to change or what's going to happen. So
yeah. Do you guys make a living off YouTube, or do you have like another job that you guys do?
No, we make a living off of YouTube now for several years.
Yeah, I think it's been 5 years. We started off I was working full-time for an online company, and Matt was doing contract work for them as well. and the YouTube videos we would sort of make in the evenings and on weekends. And then after 6 months, we realized like we didn't have enough time to work on the videos. And so we made the decision then, I think the first month that we monetized our channel, which is basically where you turn on ads and you allow ads to be shown at the beginning. The first month we made $300 and we're like, all right, we're going to quit our jobs. And I remember my boss having a meeting with me and saying, you know, 300 is not enough to live off of. Should you wait a little longer? Like, I'm open to you staying. And I said, no, we need to switch now. And again, we had that, like we had prepared and saved up 3 months of income to be able to cover our expenses. And looking back, I just think that's totally nuts that we did that, because there was no guarantee, like $300 was not enough. But I think Matt still had a couple of contracts, you know, he's an artist, so he sells paintings, and he had a couple of video editing contracts. And so we knew we could hustle and, like, you know, figure something out.
But if we hadn't done that, I don't know if it would have ever worked if we were just trying to do it part-time. Like, we had to make the decision to go all in on it and spend all our energy on it.
And I think one of the things that made us feel comfortable about taking a risk like that is that we didn't own a house, we didn't have rent to pay, and so our expenses were pretty low. We knew we had the van that we could live in pretty affordably. So I think that is something that we always try to do, is like keep our expenses low, keep a little bit of money saved, and then that way there's less risk with this kind of lifestyle. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Were you guys surprised when your YouTube channel like blew up, like everybody started watching your videos? Like, was it, I watched your first video like just earlier today, and it was you guys traveling like in your van, and it's like
it's terrible.
Yes, that video is so bad.
It's just like the one of just the photos of us going across the US. I mean, we didn't even plan to do that, or we would have taken more photos, but
I don't know if it really blew up our channel ever. It was just kind of a steady growth. Like, we did a collaboration early on with Kirsten Dirksen.
Oh yeah.
Who's been documenting this kind of stuff. She's one of the first YouTubers to do this kind of stuff.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, she's one of the pioneers.
She has like almost 800 videos, I think, and she definitely inspired us. So we got to collaborate with her.
We reached out to her. I'm sorry, I'm just butting in here.
Oh yeah.
We haven't heard back from her. So if you have any connections, Zenya would love to interview her.
Oh,
okay, cool.
Yeah, we haven't talked to her in a long time. Actually, it's been like 6 years since we collaborated with her that one time. But yeah, she's incredible. I think she must be really busy though, because she puts out, I don't know how she's been putting out videos for so many years, and so
she's traveling around with three kids.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Well, I don't know how they do it.
They're a really inspiring family.
But yeah, after that collaboration, we had a little spike. But aside from that, it's just been just steady growth. Like, nothing really just blew up. It was just like ongoing, dedicated, hard work.
Yeah.
Yeah, YouTube really rewards consistency. So we've experimented a little bit. When we first started, it would just be like, you know, let's post a video when it's ready. And then we realized you can actually see, if you don't post regularly, YouTube will stop suggesting your videos. So it sort of gets buried with other new content. Whereas it seems to be that they prefer a weekly video. So we try to put one out every week, and then they show that to more people. I guess they sort of detect that you're an active channel. Yeah. So that's sort of what we do. It's a lot. Weekly is more than I think we would like to do, just because it is so much work, right? It's about a full week of work for each video.
Wow.
If you split it up, like, there's a lot of research to find people. Canada's huge, so sometimes we'll drive 4, 5, 8 hours, you know, to go find someone living off grid up in the woods. So that's a day. Then there's the filming day, and then there's at least 3, sometimes 4 or 5 days editing. Matt does all the music for the videos, so it's like, it's a lot to keep up this kind of schedule. But then once in a while there's a video that only takes a couple days, and then that's sort of makes up for the other ones.
Yeah. Do you guys have kind of like 2 videos, and then you post one, and then like a backup, like in case you miss a week, like you can post that one?
There's no backup. For years we've been saying, like, okay, we'll work a bit harder and we'll get a head start. We'll have a few videos pre-edited, And I think we've never been able to make that work. Like
No.
even this week.
We missed last week. Yeah.
We missed last week, and we're still working on a video for this weekend. It's always, they just take so much work that we're always just making it every week.
Especially in the summer, some weeks we might film 3, sometimes 4 videos in a week. So that week might be really challenging to also find the time to edit one, you know?
Yeah.
But we're always working on it. But yeah, sometimes you miss one enough, and that's okay too. We've experimented a little bit with that. We hired a friend of ours who edited some videos, and then he ended up finding other work in his actual field. So he left. And then we've experimented with working with videographers, and it actually just made it more stressful to try to manage. And being remote, like with video files, sometimes we'll film a video and it'll be 50 gigs of data. So that if we're on the road, it can be difficult to find a place to upload that. So we would have to like mail a hard drive to somebody, and then they edit it, and then they like mail it back to us. And so it just, with us being on the move, it hasn't made sense for us.
No, and the editing that we do is so specific, or especially when we film a story about someone. Like we go meet them and we spend a day with them and get to know them, and then we film the interview. And so when we're cutting the interview, we kind of have a feel for like what the person that they are and what they're trying to get across. So it feels strange. It would feel strange to send that to an editor to cut, because I don't know, it just feels like nobody could do as good of a job as we can. Maybe it's
with that specific story.
With that specific story, yeah.
I guess we're a little attached to them. Yeah. And it's fun too. Like we actually really enjoy the editing process. It's a lot of work, but it's fun to put it together. It's funny the way that we work together. We didn't plan it this way, but it ended up being that everything that Matt likes doing, I don't like doing, and vice versa. And so I like working with the initial, full hour interview, and then the tour and all that. I love going through and sort of taking all the important parts and turning it into a bit of a story. And then Matt really likes, putting the really nice, we call it the B-roll, like, like the glamour shots of the house, and, shots of someone making their coffee or whatever. He likes doing that and adjusting the audio. And so that works out really well.
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, I know what you mean by like you like editing, but like it's kind of annoying to do constantly, because I also I've been doing like podcasts with my friend for the geography course that I'm taking, and I do the editing and I enjoy doing it, but it takes so long. It's just it's funny. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really, because you end up listening to it so many times. Yeah.
And then you start getting sick of your own voice, and you're like, oh. Yeah, definitely.
That's funny.
All right, so I think I asked you all the questions that I would like to ask. It was really great interviewing you guys. But the last question I have is just, if people want to learn more about you guys, where can they find you on YouTube, Instagram, etc.?
Our main place is YouTube. So Exploring Alternatives, if you just go to YouTube and type Exploring Alternatives. And we're on Instagram too, and Facebook. Same thing, Exploring Alternatives.
Okay, awesome. Thank you guys so much. It was great interviewing you guys. And that answered a lot of questions. I'll be posting this on my Instagram, and I might write about you guys on a blog that I'm creating as well. So
that's awesome. Well, I think it's great. I love that you're looking into this, because the housing crisis is pretty serious, and it's nice to see young people looking into different solutions, because you guys are the future. So thanks so much for taking the time to ask us about what we do.
Yeah, of course. Thank you guys for coming.
It was nice to meet you.